Welcome to Politically Georgia from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. I'm Greg Bluestein here live in studio with Tia Mitchell. Hey, Tia.
Hey, good to be in Georgia.
So you've been here now, well, you're here for basically like a 2-week stretch. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes you're here for like 3 or 4 days and then you go back to D.C. So what's been your favorite part of actually like a prolonged stay here?
First of all, I try to check off all the boxes of all the like places I want to eat and go to. So on my list is Dugan's, which has great wings.
Where's that?
It used to be by Ponce City Market, and someone bought their property and they closed the original Dugan's. But they have reopened at like North Lake Mall. And I did not know that until I was reading, I think, the AJC, and it mentioned it. And I was like, oh my God, I can go get Dugan's wings. So that is my mission while I'm here, Dugan's.
Dugan's, okay. I have to put that on the list too. Mm-hmm. What's your favorite wing style?
You know, lemon pepper wet, like a true Atlantan.
Yep, same here. They did this like this taste test here,
right?
Not long ago. I got to do it with my daughter, and both of us picked the same exact one, even though we had no idea which one it was. JR Crickets.
Yeah, JR Crickets has great wings as well.
That's my go-to. I was about to say, speaking of wings, but no, not speaking of wings. We are in the middle. We're at the start of one of our favorite segments, and that is the Monday Mailbag, where we get to hear from you, our listeners. You can ask us our favorite wing style. But you can also ask us literally anything you want about Georgia politics, comments, feedback, questions. Shaney B has a whole pile of them this week that he's been collecting. And Tia, since you've been out on the road a lot, you've been in Athens for the Congressional Luncheon while I was out of town. You've been at all sorts of events and campaign trail stops all over Georgia this week. It'll give you even more insight into what's happening on the ground here rather than covering the delegation and all that goings on in Washington. Shaney B, what do we got?
All right, let's start off with an email from John who writes, what are the pro-Collins ads referring to when they claim Ossoff supported a tax increase of $2,100 per family?
Yeah, Tia, this is a big part of Mike Collins's argument for election and his argument against Senator John Ossoff. And it has to do with the federal tax and spending law.
Yeah, the one big, beautiful bill. And it included tax cuts for people on Social Security, for people who get tipped wages, and people who make overtime. It also did extend a tax cut that mostly went to wealthy families. So and of course, Republicans voted for that bill. Democrats voted against it because in addition to the tax stuff, the One Big Beautiful Bill also cut Medicaid, cut food stamp access, and Democrats felt like the tax cuts were most impacting wealthy families, not poor and working class families. So that's what Mike Collins is talking about. But of course, he frames it in a way that doesn't get into the nuance of why Democrats oppose the bill.
Yeah, this is not like Senator Ossoff voted on a standalone bill to raise taxes by $2,100 for the average family. And there's differences over how much this will actually affect taxes for the quote unquote average family as well. Because as you mentioned, people on different taxing levels are going to end up paying differently based on this. But yeah, Democrats ended up voting in a block against this because of the 10-year out, what is it, $1 trillion cuts to Medicaid and to social services. So we knew at the time of these votes that it was just basically a battle of the narratives and who can shape those narratives. And we're going to see how Senator Ossoff ends up responding to this on the campaign trail as well. Shaney B, what else we got?
Next is Reggie from Buckhead. In an ad, Keisha Lance Bottoms says that if elected governor, she will expand Medicaid. Given the Republican majority in the state house, which would likely kill any legislation, can a newly elected Governor Bottoms expand Medicaid by executive order? This also raises the question of whether, if elected, could the state legislature strip her of specific gubernatorial powers? What would that look like?
That's a great question, Reggie. Let's start with Medicaid. No, a newly elected governor, Keisha Lance Bottoms, cannot expand Medicaid by executive order. There was a time when a governor could, and that's why it was such big news. I think back in 2012, when then Governor Deal said at the RNC that he would not be expanding Medicaid in Georgia. And at the time, some Republican governors were, some Republican governors weren't. By now, I think all but Georgia and maybe 8 or 9 other states have expanded Medicaid. But in 2014, when Republicans were worried that Jason Carter would beat Nathan Deal in Deal's reelection campaign, they passed legislation saying it was the legislature and not the governor that would get the final say. Tia, I know that you were at a congressional luncheon where Mayor Bottoms spoke, and here's what she said about Medicaid expansion.
A lot of this goes back to needing to expand Medicaid because it's causing shortages in our hospitals. Our healthcare professionals are burned out. Access to healthcare is limited in many of our communities. And we are competing not just within the state, but we are literally competing nationwide for healthcare professionals.
And her Republican opponent, billionaire Rick Jackson, also spoke about his opposition to, traditional Medicaid expansion. He talked more about what he called intelligent Medicaid expansion.
First of all, I understand how Medicaid works, and from a healthcare standpoint, and I do believe in an intelligent Medicaid expansion. And what I mean by that is to have the ability to have flexibility to have a block grant from the president, and I think we'll get that. But what that allows us to do is to help people get up.
Yeah, so Tia, we've seen these familiar battle lines being drawn again. This is really no different than what we've heard since 2012, since 2014, in every gubernatorial contest since Obamacare passed. This has been a dividing line.
Yeah, but I think what Reggie from Buckhead gets at is that what can Bottoms actually do if she has to work with the Republican legislature? And no, she cannot force the issue, but when the governor still has a lot of power, right? And even if she can't just at the stroke of her pen expand Medicaid, she does now put Democrats in a much stronger position to negotiate with Republicans on the issue. Quite frankly, there are Republicans who are ready to expand Medicaid. They just didn't have a governor's office who was going to give them the political headwinds, if you will, to do it. But now Keisha Lance Bottoms can work with Democrats, can work with Republicans who are open to it, maybe work something out. She also has the bully pulpit to say, hey, this is my top priority. You want me to do some things you want to do, then, hey, you're going to have to work with me on Medicaid expansion. So it's just a different conversation when the person in the governor's office wants to do it.
Yeah, you're totally right. It becomes a bargaining chip in a sense. If Mayor Bottoms says, as governor, my top priority will be to pass this, I'll trade you, she might not say it so publicly, but I'll trade you this provision, this tax incentive, this measure that Republicans really want. And Tia, you're exactly right. We've watched the Republican opposition to Medicaid expansion steadily erode over the last decade to the point where, even going into session a couple of years ago, there's a lot of talk about Georgia going the way of the Arkansas private option model. There were a lot of Republicans who even voted for a full-scale Medicaid expansion in a committee vote. It took Senator Bill Cowsert coming in. He's the governor's brother-in-law and also a staunch conservative to come in to kind of defeat that vote in a committee hearing. So, we've seen the movement, even with other conservative Republicans saying, hey, look, it's time to stop this fight. The difference, of course, is that Governor Kemp said, nah, not on my watch. Right. Medicaid will never be expanded on my watch. And then after President Trump was elected, it took the wind out of the sails of even Republicans who wanted to expand.
And I just want to make one other point. One of the things, the pressure is growing on states that haven't expanded Medicaid because they're watching the other 41 states get billions in for larger states after so many years, possibly trillions of dollars. And it's becoming a harder thing to defend when your state is passing up this money that other states are getting. And they're looking at the hospital systems in the other states getting the Medicaid money, and your hospitals are going, hey, you all the arguments that, Obamacare wasn't going to last and the money wasn't going to last. Well, it's been over 10 years and my brothers and sisters at these hospitals in other states are getting the Medicaid expansion money. We got to do it. So it's just the more time that passes, the more pressure comes. The number of states has consistently gone down. And now there are just 10, mostly in the South, mostly Republican-led states that have not expanded Medicaid.
And as the sort of repeal Obamacare push dissolves, right? There's been no real major effort during Trump's second term to actually repeal it. This program is here to stay. My bold prediction is no matter who wins, there will be a push towards, they might call it different things if it's Rick Jackson wins, but there will be a significant push towards a much broader Medicaid expansion is my guess or prediction in a Jackson term. In a Bottoms term, she'll make it a top priority, just as Stacey Abrams did, just as Jason Carter did if they were going to be elected. The second question was, what could the legislature do to strip her of specific gubernatorial powers? And we do expect the legislature to call a special session, and we've said this a lot, but we can't help but remind folks that this is likely to happen in a late November or December special session if Bottoms wins the governor's gig. And I think it could look a lot like what happened in North Carolina. It's, of course, a different state, a different constitution. There'll be different legal issues. But you could see schemes set up for legislative approval of certain executive appointments. There could be, just different thresholds for what the governor can do with in Bottoms' case, her executive power. There's not a cabinet system like in some states, so the legislature wouldn't necessarily have final say over who the cabinet appointments were. But the legislature could get a lot more leeway over regulatory powers, over executive branch powers, and over appointments.
Mm-hmm. And appointments is a big one because look at what's happening in Kentucky where the legislature changed the law to take powers away from the governor to fill vacancies with the congressional delegation because Kentucky is a red state but has a Democratic governor. And now that's playing out somewhat in the conversation about what could happen if there is a vacancy in the Senate in Kentucky with Mitch McConnell in poor health. So, could something like that happen in Georgia? We don't know. Also, there's likely to be legal fights if they try, and people arguing what constitutionally the governor's rights that have to be protected because they're in the state constitution. It would get tied up in court, but you're right. If Bottoms wins, you can expect the other thing I think is if Republicans remain in control of the state house and the state Senate, because, Democrats are hopeful. They're hopeful. I'm not saying that it's likely, but they're trying, starting with the Georgia House, to pick up seats to get that majority.
Still a long shot, but there could be, there's a reasonable world where Democrats pick up 3 or 4 seats, maybe not enough to flip, but enough to make it life more uncomfortable for Republicans. Shani B, do we have time for one more before break?
All right, next is Ari and Marietta, who writes, I keep hearing Democrats are close to controlling the Public Service Commission. If that actually happens, does anything about my power bill change? Or is this one of those things that sounds huge, but doesn't really move the needle?
My best friend is an Ari from Marietta. It could be huge, because Republicans have had a lock on the Public Service Commission for years. And it was the flips of 2 of those seats last year by a huge margin, by 26 or so points, that really gave Democrats a head of steam going into this election year. But Tia, there's a lot on the table. The Public Service Commission, we have a reporter, Drew Can, who covers it, and Christy Swartz, who cover it relentlessly, but it doesn't get, the huge headlines. It's not necessarily the big breaking news moments that a lot of what we talk about deliver. But this is the body that gives the final regulatory stamp on so much of what goes into our power bills, of where power plants are built, of how data centers are regulated. I mean, so much of what our utilities revolve around are decided by this regulatory body. Yeah.
And does your power bill change immediately? No. But could decisions made by the PSC have long-term kind of residual effects on your power bill? Absolutely, because for the reasons that Greg just laid out. So if Democrats get control, they know they're being elected with the mandate to do something about energy costs. They're being elected with the mandate that people are concerned about the rise of data centers and the draw on not just electricity, but water resources. So I think if the PSC becomes a Democratic majority, which it could if this election flips one more seat, you could expect perhaps a different general approach to some of these, Georgia Power being chief among them, just having a different mindset and a different sensibilities, different priorities. And that, again, could have long-term residual effects. But I don't think people should expect just like drastic, all of a sudden, Georgia Power is being told no. Georgia Power is extremely powerful. They've got a lot of lobbyists. They got a lot of lawyers. They make a tough case. They are the biggest utility company in the state. And at the end of the day, they do need to build power plants. And they do sometimes say, hey, this is why we need to raise rates. And they make a good case. So I don't think we should expect the PSC to all of a sudden start telling Georgia Power no every time either.
Another bold prediction, if the PSC balance of power flips as well, you could also see a legislative push during that same special session to maybe rein in the PSC's powers level. We'll see. Well, let's take a break quick because I know, Shani B, we have a lot more questions to come. This is Politically Georgia from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Welcome back to Politically Georgia. Tia Mitchell and Greg Bluestein here with you for this Monday Mailbag edition. A reminder, if you've got a question you'd like to ask us here in Politically Georgia, you can call our hotline anytime, leave a question, we'll play it back and answer it right here on the show during our Monday Mailbag segment. The number is 770-810-5297. That's 770-810-5297. You can also email us, all one word, politicallygeorgia@ajc.com. We all get it. Even our editors. So send them on. We can't wait to hear from you. Shani B, what else we got?
All right, let's do a text message. This one came in from Jason in Gainesville. Is it still weird between Rick Jackson and Brian Kemp after Brian Kemp endorsed the other guy?
And that is Brian Kemp, of course, endorsing Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones.
Mm-hmm.
And Tia, you were there. I missed it. I was scuba diving in the Cayman Islands. So I was okay about missing it.
I can't believe you would miss this luncheon to go scuba diving. What is wrong?
Something's wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
But you were there as Governor Kemp and Rick Jackson had like a sort of unofficial debut. I don't know. I don't know if that was all. We knew they would be in the same room together, but they ended up having a little press conference on the sidelines of that luncheon. Let's listen.
Rick knows what it's like to struggle. He did it himself as a young child, but he didn't let that keep him down. He worked hard. He's smart. He's created thousands of jobs, given opportunity to thousands of Georgians, and really, I think, has the character to be our next governor, and also the heart.
Look, I think we need to erect a monument for this man, what he went through in COVID. No, I really do. I saw firsthand one of the most difficult times in all of our lives, and the way you responded was unbelievable, and what you've done. And I'm going to try my best to be at least as good and build off that legacy and so forth of what you've done.
So, Greg, confession time. I was there, right? It was so, to this listener's question, like, was it weird? It was so not weird that I didn't even pick up on how, monumental this really was. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, if you don't think about the fact that Brian Kemp endorsed against Rick Jackson, like a day before the primary or whatever, a couple of days before the primary, like chose to get in the game right before the runoff, and then endorsed against him, you wouldn't know that from how they interacted at the luncheon.
That's interesting.
I didn't even think about, I'm here, but I'm in DC, so I'm a little bit removed from it all. And like I knew it, but I didn't think about it. It just seemed like, of course, like outgoing Republican governor is going to have a press conference with the Republican nominee to replace him. Like, of course, what's so weird about that? But again, when you put it in context that he endorsed against Rick Jackson, like they acted like they have been best buds. They acted like, we love each other. You're great. I'm great. We're going to be great together. Yeah. Like it was, I don't know what it took to get them there. And maybe Brian Kemp just was like, hey, nothing personal. My bad. And, all is well. Or maybe they really hate each other and they just grinned for the cameras. I don't know. But it looked very seamless.
Yeah. And we've talked and written a lot about the behind the scenes drama. And I think too, this sort of seamless, low drama sort of sidelines press conference was by design, right? I mean, we didn't get heads up saying, oh, this would be a major moment, because we'd have hyped it up a little bit more, had we. But we also knew that they were going to be in the same room for the first time, at least in public. And the governor's been very much taking a behind the scenes role since those runoff defeats. And that was, of course, not just Burt Jones, who he endorsed 2 or 3 days before the runoff, but it was also, he backed Eric Dooley aggressively, not just backed him, but helped build his campaign with him on the campaign trail, all that, all those things we've talked about for the last year and a half. And Mike Collins, of course, beats Derek Dooley. So the governor took a licking, and he took a bruising, I should say, and he's been sort of licking his wounds since then. And he's been, doing a lot of economic development work behind the scenes. He's still doing his job. He's just been much less front and center than he was in the run up to the runoff, where he was like, right beside Derek Dooley. He was right beside Burt Jones the final couple days before his runoff against Rick Jackson. And so this is the governor sort of clearing the air. And now the question is, what role is he going to play the next few months? Is he, we know his machine isn't being deployed in the same way that we'd expect it to be behind Derek Dooley if he was the nominee. We know we know the governor's also endorsed Mike Collins, so there's no sort of bad blood here, but he warned throughout this entire race that someone like Mike Collins could not beat John Ossoff. And here we are.
Yeah. And I think the governor knows it's one thing to endorse. It's one thing to have a news conference, but on the outside looking in, I think it would look a little bit disingenuous if all of a sudden he's like, and I'm on the trail, and, the Democrats are going to say, just remind voters all the bad things he said about Mike Collins more specifically. I don't necessarily think he talked bad about Rick Jackson, but again, he did not endorse Rick Jackson when it was a runoff against Burt Jones. And the timing of that endorsement, I think, made it look more deliberate. If he had endorsed Burt Jones from day one, he could have said, hey, I don't have anything against Rick Jackson. It's just I came out the gate with Burt Jones and I'm sticking with my person. Whereas he waited until the end and was like, okay, now that there's a binary choice, I'm going to make a choice. And then he chose the guy who didn't win. So I just think it just is smart politically for Governor Kemp to keep it to a minimum so that he and his endorsement for the other guy doesn't become too much of a focus as now the person who actually won tries to win in November.
And we know Mike Collins has his own political operation. He was the first of the Senate candidates to organize in all 159 Georgia counties. We know that Rick Jackson is not depending on anyone else, right? He's not depending on the Georgia GOP to the point where he hadn't even talked to Josh McCoon as of a couple of days ago. I haven't checked more recently, but as of a couple of days ago, he hadn't even talked to Chairman Josh McCoon yet, and certainly isn't relying on Kemp's political machine. He's building his own. This does sort of, I keep thinking back to 2022 when we talked and wrote a lot about how Governor Kemp would handle Herschel Walker. And doing the entire general election stretch, he's like, look, Herschel Walker's running his own campaign. He certainly didn't want to be tied to it, but he's like, I've got my own campaign to run. After Kemp won without a runoff, and in this stretch before the Senate runoff, he campaigned with Herschel Walker once or twice and did so, and gave his standard sort of the stump speech line, but, also didn't go directly into some of the concerns that folks had with Herschel Walker's background, spoke more about how Herschel Walker would help Republicans, take control of the U.S. Senate. And this is so different because he's directly endorsed against the two top party nominees. So I really will be, is he going to be on the campaign trail just for a few major moments? Or will he do anything close to what we saw with Derek Dooley? I think it's more the former than the latter. I do not think we'll be seeing Kemp 4 or 5 times a day for 2 weeks at a time like we did in the run-up to the runoff.
Yeah, I agree. But, that Brian Kemp postmortem, I'm putting it on you, Greg, because I just have Brian and Marty Kemp. Marty Kemp, lady, please write your tell-all. I'm going to eat it up. Because and she actually won an award at the chamber luncheon, we should note. And she got a standing ovation. She's very beloved as a first lady. And she has been very active on the campaign trail. But then there are, as you and I both know, there are certain candidates, certain elected officials that she has chosen not to appear with, mainly Donald Trump. And there are so many things about this election season that I would love to, once he's not in office anymore and kind of can take the gloves off or whatever, I would love to hear more from both of them about this experience.
You're right. We need to get Marty Kemp.
Yes, Marty Kemp, girl.
We're coming for you, First Lady. Shady B, what else we got?
Okay, next is a text message from Carl who writes, is Elon Musk really about to start throwing money into Georgia races?
Oh, what are we hearing about that?
Yeah, so Elon Musk is getting ready to start spending money on races to help Republican candidates. And we know that he has a lot of money to spend. He is the richest man in the world. He was very active in the 2024 election cycle. And so there have been news reports. Reuters, I think, was the first one I saw. I think Axios also had some initial reporting as well, that he is setting aside $100 million. Now, right now, Georgia is not on the list, but Reuters reported that it is one of those states that he is considering. So I think that there are some people who are trying to convince Elon Musk that, hey, take a look at Georgia, take a look. We would love to get your money down here. So I don't think it's definitely happening, but I think, again, there are people who would like for it to happen.
And we know he's done it before. He spent over $20 million in Wisconsin alone, not on a Senate race or a governor's race, but on the race to control the state Supreme Court. And there, those judicial contests are far more partisan than ours are in Georgia. And Tia, one of the more controversial things he did, that money wasn't just spent on like TV ads and mailers and that kind of thing. He gave out $1 million checks to voters. So he was going far and beyond what we normally see in politics on spending money. And a bipartisan elections panel recently found that he likely violated Wisconsin law for doing that. So an interesting takeaway from his last big involvement.
The New York Times is the one that said Georgia was a possible state on the list. So again, not certain, but I think there are people who think Mike Collins needs as much help as he can get from outside groups. We know that fundraising-wise, through his direct campaign committee, he cannot match Ossoff in fundraising. But where Collins can pick up the difference is with third-party spending. And so I think they're looking at people like Elon Musk, and I think we should note, Mike Collins loves to talk about John Ossoff raising money from the coastal elites. Well, Elon Musk is not a Georgia resident. So, but again, we said in the past, he's going to take the money wherever he can get it from, just like John Ossoff.
I think he lives in Texas now, so he could be like the Midwestern or Western elite. Yeah, and you're exactly right. And that's why August is going to be such an important month for this Senate campaign and we heard Stephen Lawson, Republican strategist who's close with Mike Collins, say the same thing on our show a few days ago. If you start seeing the poll numbers show that Mike Collins is gaining any sort of traction and narrowing that deficit with John Ossoff, then maybe some more outside money kind of shifts towards Georgia. And right now, we've only seen an increase, right? We saw another $15 million spend from a group aligned with the Senate Republicans. But if those poll numbers continue to show a giant deficit, we've seen as far as 9 or 10 points, then it'll be a lot harder for Collins's campaign to show these outside groups that they should spend money on a state like Georgia rather than Michigan or Texas or North Carolina or Maine or you name it. There's these other competitive Senate races. Shani B, do we have time for one more?
Oh, let's read Danielle's email. She sent this in from Toco Hills. Buddy Carter lost his Senate primary, and now he's suddenly meeting with the White House about future opportunities. Is this how it works now? You lose and Trump finds you a job anyway?
Well, it kind of is how it works.
I said there's a famous meme where the lady's like, well, yes, So especially in Donald Trump's way of governing where loyalty is rewarded, often with ways to make you money, whether that's a job in his administration or a contract or an appointment to an ambassadorship, which you can say, well, all presidents have done that, but not to the extent that Donald Trump has. And we know during this primary where Buddy Carter was trying to get the Republican nomination, he did a whole lot trying to ingratiate himself with the Trump administration and President Trump specifically, down to like the renaming of Greenland and the renaming of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. Like, he did a lot to try to like show Donald Trump that he was there to like support him. And the other thing I think that I've observed speaking to Representative Carter since he lost the primary is that he is not ready to retire. He is, sometimes an elected official will lose and say, that's my sign to pack it up, go home, live quietly. That's not what Buddy Carter right now is ready to do. He might get there, but right now he is not ready to do that. He feels like he has more to give. He wants to be part of the process. So I also think that's part of how he's looking for different opportunities.
Yeah, that's a good point. And we only need to look at recent Georgia history to see that this is the Trump pattern. I mean, Herschel Walker lost the 2022 Senate race. He is now the U.S. ambassador to the Bahamas. Kelly Loeffler lost that 2021 race. She is now a member of Donald Trump's cabinet as the small business administrator. Doug Collins lost that same 2020 special election, and he is now the Veterans Affairs Secretary. David Perdue lost the 2021 runoff as well, and the 2022 race for governor, and he is now the U.S. ambassador to China. So those are just four, but I know around the nation there are plenty of other examples. Okay, before we wrap up, a quick note. Politically Georgia is powered by subscribers to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. If you are already a subscriber, thank you. And if you don't, you can join us this very moment at ajc.com/start. You'll get full access to our reporting, analysis, subscriber newsletters, and special events throughout this election year. That's ajc.com/start. That's going to do it for today's edition of Politically Georgia. If you found us on YouTube, welcome to our channel. And please click the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. We'll talk to you next time on Politically Georgia from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Thanks for listening to the Politically Georgia podcast. Our executive producer is Shane Backler. AJC's head of audio is Sam Stamler. Production support from our partners at Goat Rodeo, including Kara Schillen, Hazel Hoffman, and Max Johnston. For more of our political coverage, visit ajc.com/politicallygeorgia, and we invite you to support local journalism by subscribing to the AJC. Join us again next time on the Politically Georgia podcast from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution.